Uh, Hi, Darius. Good to catch up again. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this mini interview about your journey through recovery from pelvic pain. We're going to cover three key questions today. So what is your pelvic pain background? So onset of symptoms, what symptoms you had, the investigations that you went through, and then the impact that those symptoms had for you. What we did together in recovery, some examples of some of the bits and pieces that we went through, and then what if any, advice you'd give to anyone who's going through this at the moment. So you contacted me back in August 2019 now, and you said in your email inquiry that you'd just been given a diagnosis of chronic pelvic pain syndrome, or prostatitis, that was the term that your urologist used. So tell me a little bit around the onset of your symptoms. What was happening for you? What did you start to experience?
Yeah, of course. So it's actually quite funny, something I'll return to again later on. But the way when you say it's August 2019, if I was to guess, looking back, I felt like it was like a year before I contacted you from my symptoms. And I can see here I've written down January 2019 is when I first got my proper symptoms. So it feels like it was a lot longer than it was. I guess that's just because of the experience it was. It felt like it was at least a year when it wasn't. But yeah, so my symptoms came on periodically, really. I sort of first experienced a tingle maybe in sort of December 2018. It would sort of just have a little tingle for a little bit and then it would go away, and I was like, oh, that was weird. And then I had that a couple of times in different days, and I thought, oh, maybe it's a urine infection or something. I mentioned it to my mom and stuff, and she was like, oh yeah, it'll probably just clear up on its own, don't worry about it. It went away, and then I was like, yeah, whatever then. It's gone, so that's fine. And then in sort of mid-January 2019, I sort of got the same feeling again, except this time it didn't go away. It stayed. I got that sort of tingly sort of feeling. I was like, this is weird. I went to the gym as normal and it stayed the whole time. I got home, and after I've had it sort of the whole day, that's when I started to get a little bit worried. That's when the panic started to kick in, oh crap, what's wrong with me? What's going on here? And I still remember that night because that was a very rough night, actually, where I was in my bed and I was just really in a sort of a panic mode, thinking, oh my goodness, your mind's racing. What's going on? This won't go away. I need to get to the doctors in the morning. And which I did. So I went to the doctors, and yeah, I got the check over. Everything's absolutely fine. Don't worry. There's no physical symptoms, nothing to worry about. So I was like, oh, okay. This is just a thing. It's going to go away. Unfortunately, it never did go away. It sort of stuck around for a long time, unfortunately. In terms of the symptoms themselves, so I mentioned that it started off as sort of tingly, and even though we refer to it as pelvic pain, so I'm not sure how it is for other people, Cole, but for me at least, I would never really have explained it as pain, but more of like a ache, like a dull ache. It was achy, sometimes tingly, per se, and that came alongside a bit later on, maybe like a month or two later, with sort of sensitivity in that area around the tip of the penis, and then a few months after that, then it sort of got a little bit worse, and then I got sort of the increased urgency to pee, which came along with that as well. So that was sort of the symptoms I was getting, and I was explaining this to the doctors, and they were just thinking, okay, this must be just thrush or something like that. That's the sort of initial diagnosis I got, and they were saying, well, we can't see any thrush, but that's what it must be. It has to be something. It has to be something that you've got wrong with you. So that led into months and months of using creams for thrush, going back and saying, it's not doing anything. Okay, try this cream then. Back again. No, hasn't done anything. Try this cream. And they seem to be obsessed with this idea that I had thrush for some reason for at least 3 months or so. And then from that, it went into, it's in your head. It's not real. It's because you're anxious. It's, it's not a real thing. There's nothing wrong with you. So it can't be you know, it can't, and that's the sort of feeling I got from them, is what, you know, you're just imagining this, it's not, it's all in your head. But unfortunately for me, it was very real. And so that sort of came along with a lot of worries and anxieties of, you know, it's not going away. Is it cancer? Is it something serious? So I pushed, luckily I had private healthcare, and I pushed to see a urologist to get a bit more of a, you know, dedicated look at sort of what was going on, a little bit more specific, get some more advanced tests happening. I had a cystoscopy, I think that's what it's called. I did have that as well, which everything again was coming back clear. There's nothing wrong with you. I was recommended antibiotics for 6 weeks just to see if that would help. And that's, at that point, I was just like, no, I'm not. I was just losing faith in them. I was like, I'm not doing that. They told me there's possible side effects, long-term side effects from taking them for so long. And I was just like, absolutely no. At this point, Cole, sorry, I'm not sure where to go next. Do you want me to lead on to, so hopefully I know you can edit this, do you want me to lead on to talking about how I came to you now, or would you like me to sort of?
Yeah. So just maybe a little bit of the impact of the symptoms. You were in a new relationship at the time.
Yep.
You know, you were coming towards the end of your studies as well. So there was different pressures at different times. You know, this was kind of just pre-pandemic as well, wasn't it? So there was all this change that we had no idea was, sorry, all the change that you were going through, and then we had all the impacts of what was happening in terms of working from home, not being able to see anyone face to face. So how were your symptoms influencing you around that time?
Yeah, so the impact of this was pretty severe. So I was going into my 3rd year of my PhD, and I had recently begun a new relationship, which again was something that I was sharing with the doctors at the time. And that's something, as soon as I mentioned new relationship, that's something they honed in on, you know, that's because of that. But I kept making it clear I had these symptoms before I met her. So they were nothing to do with my new partner. They weren't anxiety of meeting her. I was having these symptoms before, but naturally, pelvic pain is probably one of the last things you want to have when you've just begun a new relationship, when you've got anxiety in the area and then you've just met someone new. Yeah, probably the worst time to get it. So that, I remember the anxiety was really high. Yeah, it had a big impact, and especially on my PhD. The longer it went on, the harder it got, because with the pelvic pain, I just kept thinking it will be gone soon. It will be gone soon. This time next month, it will be gone. So let's take this month easy. Don't worry about your PhD. We'll get back to it next month. Next month would come. It would still be there. And now I'm a month behind on my PhD, and the symptoms are still there. So it felt like this endless loop of it just kept getting worse and worse. And that the pressure just got higher. The deadline was looming. So yeah, I think that was really tough, trying to juggle those two things together. And then, like you said, I think being a PhD student, it was quite isolated anyway. And then the pandemic came,
Yeah, which
just made things 10 times worse in a way, already being isolated. And then, yeah, for someone who didn't socialize super often, even someone like me realized how important that was, to have those little moments of socialization that you lose when you're just at home all the time and you can't socialize with anyone. So yeah, it was really, really challenging during that time.
Thank you, Darius. And, you know, not being able to see anyone, not being able to see anyone face to face in terms of treatments, you know, we'd started a little bit before then. And we'll go on to what we were doing for you in terms of your recovery. But you mentioned that you were getting some symptoms at the tip of the penis, some tingling, some symptoms just generally in the pelvis. How were your symptoms presenting then? What were the urinary type symptoms, increased frequency? You mentioned the tip of the penis itself. Can you expand a little bit more on that for us, Darius?
Yeah, so they sort of came on in stages, really. As it started off as the tingly, that was exclusively just tingling. Then it went a little bit achy. It just seemed like things were getting added on top of the symptoms rather than they never exchanged for one another. They never I never got something new and something went away. It was almost just like it kept building on top of each other. So I had the tingling, then I had the aching and the tingling. Then I would have the sensitivity. The sensitivity probably came on a month or two after. I'm still never 100% sure why that came on, whether that was just from me being so obsessed with that area. And I think that's probably where it really came down to, was that I was obsessed with that area 24/7. You know, how does it feel? Oh no, I got a little tingle. What does that mean? I'm putting cream down there every day as well, which just made me constantly focused on that area and constantly visiting that area. But I never got any physical symptoms. So when I did get the increased urgency to pee, that was a different challenge, because suddenly it was something a little bit more real. Suddenly something was actually really presenting itself physically. So that was a different challenge to go through, which was strange, because again, you don't realize how it feels to have to think about peeing. There's never something I ever thought about. It's just like, oh, I need to pee, I'm going to go, and then that's it. So suddenly, then it was like every time I was going to go out, it was like, okay, I should pee just in case. Oh no, what if I need to pee when I'm here with friends or something? But what I quickly realized, I might go into this in a moment, so apologies if I mentioned too early, but what I did realize with the urgency to pee as well is that a lot of it never came true, or a lot of them worries that I had never came true. When I was worried, like, oh, my friends are going to think I'm weird because I'm going to have to go to the toilet 5 times. When I actually got out and I got busy and I was doing what I was doing, I often didn't need to pee anyway. So it was the fear and the anxiety of needing to.
So common, and thank you so much for pointing that out, Darius, as well. You know, you were getting sensations and weird tingling sensations along the penis, and then having this increased need to pee, and that the peeing just in case. You know, I'm going to pee just in case before I go here, when I come back, and so rightly so. Often it is the fear or the anticipation of a symptom and the impact of it, and how we're going to be judged, how we're going to respond with that. How am I going to find a toilet? How can I then go travel to Scandinavia to see your partner? How can you then go to work and teach? How can you then get go and see friends or socialize or go to the gym? It's all the potential of what it might be. So we worked on that with you as well, though. So maybe now is a good introduction to start talking about some of the tools or the approaches, the methodologies that we put in place to help you to mitigate the symptoms and gain more and more confidence.
Yeah, definitely. So I think I remember, and I hope you forgive me for saying this, what I say in a moment, but I remember, like, when I did contact you, Karl, I was at rock bottom. I was out of options. I just didn't know what to do at that point. I just had, I knew that the urologist was like, there's nothing left to do. There's nothing else. There's no test. So maybe you can try these antibiotics and they might help. But, it's just, it was the impression I got was, you're just going to have to live with this. Sorry, there's nothing we can do. And the thought of that was like, but I don't want to live like this. I can't, this is horrible. I don't want to, it's something that's getting worse as well. I wasn't getting better. It was getting worse. So the dread of where it might end up in a couple of years. So I contacted Prostate Cancer UK. I knew I didn't have prostate cancer because I'd been checked for it, but I just thought maybe they'd be able to help. I contacted them, and they recommended me to you. They sent me a link to your website. I checked out your website, and I have to be honest, I was skeptical. I thought, this sounds too good to be true. All these people that have been cured of pelvic pain, I was like, I don't believe it. I've seen like 10 different doctors. I've seen a urologist. I was thinking, yeah, I'm not too hopeful. So I did actually put it off for a little bit. I think you might remember I contacted you, and then I kind of left it for a while thinking, I don't think it's going to help. But in retrospect, I'm so glad that I did push ahead with it, of course. So eventually I thought, you know what, this is so important to me. I'm going to give it a try. I'm going to see how it goes. And I think that's a big thing that I'll probably get back to again about what I'd recommend to people. But we're so focused on medication and science. It's not particularly science, but medication and sort of what we can take and the magical pill that will take and cure us. And yeah, in retrospect, that was a naive way of thinking, and it's definitely opened my eyes up to different ways of seeing cures and health and stuff like that. But I think when we initially went into, going back to when we first sort of met, I think immediately, even from the first phone call, I think it was just such a relief for someone to talk to me and just understand what I was going through, and to listen to me, and to, yeah, just to let me share my story, to feel like I wasn't being rushed away. And I never once did you say this was in your head or it's not real. And I think that was just so great. That first phone call, I got off the phone and I just felt very optimistic already. I thought, this is, why have I not done this sooner? I remember thinking that when I did that. So then it came to our first meeting, and again, it was just very nice to, again, speak to someone in person. So we go back to that online. You know, the phone call was great, but being able to speak to someone in person, to feel like someone actually cared about what you were saying, and it was a personal, and you said to me that you'd been through it yourself. And I hadn't had that before. I'd never spoke to anyone that had gone through it, or the doctors looked at me like, we've never seen this before. What, you know, we've never seen anyone that's got this issue. No one had ever said, oh yeah, I knew someone that had this, or anything like that. But I remember even having to hold back the tears during our first meeting, because I remember just finding it overwhelming that it was so nice to have someone listen to me and understand what I was saying. So initially, I think that was such a big help, you know, being able to talk about it and someone to understand it. And I remember from our first meeting, we were covering some of that stuff, you know, talking about the symptoms, talking about some of my personal life. But there's a couple of things that stick with me. I'm sure I don't remember everything that we discussed, but I remember sort of the first initial meeting. I remember feeling your confidence as well, which gave me confidence. You were so confident that you were going to cure, or help me and cure me. And I think that I was a bit like, whoa, this guy's so confident. You know, he doesn't feel like, you know, maybe this will help. You were pretty confident. So that gave me confidence as well. And I remember one of the things that stuck out to me was the overflowing cup of water example you gave as well. And I think that stuck with me a lot, because that's sort of a life lesson. You were talking about, you know, my body's capability of dealing with stress, pressure, overworking, etc. And that was a cup of water that kept filling up. And when it overfilled, that was when these symptoms would come out. And I do think that's a life lesson that I've taken with me forward as well. And something else that stuck up to me, I remember you saying, was, you said there's nothing wrong with you. In fact, your body's working too well. And I remember thinking, what? That is not how I feel. But I remember leaving that session and thinking, that's quite relieving to hear, actually, that you put a positive spin on it. And I think that definitely helped a lot, because constantly in my mind, I was like, what is wrong with my body? You know, what's so bad about my body? So to have a positive spin on it definitely helped. So that was great. The first session, we sort of covered some of those. I think it was some breathing exercises, some stretches. I remember the belly massage, because I still do that one, especially. We started with some of those things, some light, and I think I left that session very positive. And I'm quite good with that stuff. I did stick to the routine very religiously. So I think the intentions there, looking back retrospectively, you know, was to sort of calm my body down, and I think get past that feeling of that immediate threat. You know, get past that thinking of you've got cancer, you're going to die, something bad's going to happen, you're going to ruin your PhD, you're going to ruin your life. And so I think it was just to calm down and get things to a good foundation, which we did quite quickly, if I remember right. I remember we were doing quite well in those early stages, and then I think we were meeting sort of every 3 to 4 weeks, and we were sort of introducing things on top of those. I remember we had the second meeting we had, we were going over sort of, you were asking me to rate my symptoms, and I remember when I came back to you and you were saying, well, actually your scores have improved. And I've been thinking, what, already? I don't feel like they had. I don't feel like my symptoms were improving that quickly, but they really were. And then we were introducing things on top of that. We went through I know you remember you introducing the mindfulness, which I started adding on top of those exercises. And I think for me, it was just a very gradual improvement. For me, it wasn't something that just sort of happened overnight. It wasn't like I woke up and I know this will be very individual, but it wasn't like after 1 week, my symptoms were gone. I just remember that time just recalled, I was like, wow, I've just had a day without pelvic pain. I remember that sort of realization. And then slowly it became 2 days without pelvic pain, and then 3 days without pelvic pain. And then I think it just got better and better. And yeah, I think we just sort of added things on top. And I remember one of the things that was quite crucial as well, it wasn't just about these exercises, it wasn't just about what we were doing, but one of the things I started to do when I got my pelvic pain was I abstained from my hobbies, I abstained from socialization, and I started to pull myself away from that a bit more. And this was pre-pandemic, so of course it wasn't choice. It was a choice. It wasn't. I didn't have to do these things. So that was something we worked on as well. You encouraged me to get back into my hobbies, to try new things, and I did. And so I can't always just credit one thing. I think it was always a mixture of, we were doing many different things. So it's hard for me to sort of recall and say, okay, this was the one thing that really worked. But in combination, it did work. So all those things contributed. And I think it was just one of those things really where it just kept getting better and better and better over a course of sort of several months. I think it was by January 2020 was when I really felt this is sort of getting behind me now.
Thank you so much, Darius. And it's so many contributing factors, and they're all important at different times of a person's recovery. Building that solid foundation, giving you the tools in order to make you more confident more of the time, implementing them, and that's a real challenge in itself as well. Is, you know, okay, look, I need to do this. This is an investment of my time. And so we make it realistic and easy to begin with. Bit of breathing, bit of some movement specific to your symptoms, and some abdominal massage. Then we start to put into place, okay, what else can you do? What else is missing from your life? What do you want to be doing more of? Here's a permission slip. Let's start doing these things. Let's gradually build them in. And I can prove to you that they're going to be really central in your recovery. Every follow-up, we update your movement plan. We make it a bit more challenging. We add some additional concepts like the mindfulness to it. Then we started talking around diet, and even kind of a schedule for you in terms of your studies, in terms of exercising, in terms of home life at home, and then cooking, just having a bit more structure, helping you to build the confidence that you needed to start taking more and more and more steps towards, I feel closer and closer to where I want to be. And that takes time as well, doesn't it? It doesn't, as you said, it doesn't happen overnight. I track and monitor every patient's progress, and I use a number of different forms in terms of symptoms, efficacy, as in how confident you are to be able to engage with things, anxiety, catastrophization. And it's really difficult, isn't it, to remember just where we were last month or 2 months ago, and always get you to complete the forms. And then we're just tracking, oh, look, there's change here. This has dropped a little bit in terms of symptoms. Your confidence here is increasing. How do we build on this? What's left? What other components do we need to work on here as well? And you took on board the information, and ultimately, you know, you are the person that drives your own recovery. I get the easy job. I get to help and steer, and we get to catch up every now and again, but you're the person who puts in the hard graft. You're the person who has to say, okay, look, I'm going to make this commitment to change, and it starts to pay off.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the tough parts is when you're in that position, you're feeling so low, you want that quick fix. You want to feel like, I think that's why I chased that doctor thing. I was like, I'm going to take this pill and it's going to make me better in a week, and then I'm going to go back, and then my life will be, because we've all got things we need to do, we're all busy people, we don't want to be feeling like this for long. But I think that's just something you just need, and that was what you helped me with. It's just like, I remember you telling me, you're going to have to put in work for this. This isn't going to happen automatically. And I think that's only right. I think we should have to put in something to get something out. We're kind of obsessed with this magical pill that we're going to take and everything's going to go away and we don't have to do anything. But it did. And I think that it did take work, and we did have to do quite a few different things. And it wasn't just do this one thing and then you're going to get better. Yeah. It was a combination of things. But I think what's really important, what's really great about those things as well, is that I still do the mindfulness today. I still do these things today. Mm-hmm. And it's not just like you get rid of your pelvic pain and then, that's it, you leave them behind. I think there's stuff that you can take forward with you for the rest of your life.
Yeah, and that's it. And those things that you invested in, it doesn't mean that you have to keep symptoms at bay, but actually there's a lot of validity in people being more mindful more of the time. There's a lot of validity in doing movements and exercise and you know, putting the body into varying situations or positions. It's just good for our general well-being. You know, before we came on the call, you spoke about processed food, and actually that you've taken processed food out of your diet, and the benefits are, well, there's loads of benefits for anyone to take away processed food from their diet. So there are things that have stuck, and there are things that are now good lessons just to keep good maintenance moving further forward. But there were also ups and downs along that road to recovery as well. It wasn't like a smooth decline in symptoms. So if this is getting better every single time I look up, it's just getting better. There were bumps along the road. There were times when symptoms came back. There were times when it was more challenging, and then times when it was less so.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that we often refer to that as sort of flare-ups, and we definitely had flare-up moments. And I still, you know, this is something I will get to, that I still have flare-ups, much rarer, very rare now. But at the time when you got a flare-up, it was, and you didn't have you weren't as comfortable with those tools. And I think that's the thing that now we would talk about, is what you've given me, Karl, is the tools to deal with those flare-ups now, which I didn't quite have before, or I wasn't experienced with those tools. Yeah. And that when those flare-ups would come, then thoughts would come flooding back in. Oh no, you know, cancer, you're not going to have kids, or whatever it is, the worries, the anxieties that flood in. Yeah. And they still did in the early days when we first started. It wasn't like they just went away overnight. And yeah, then flare-ups would still happen, and they were still challenging to deal with.
Absolutely, yeah. Flare-ups are really, really tough. I'd say that's probably one of the toughest components of going through recovery is, what the hell do I do now? You know, I'm really suffering. I thought I was getting better. Symptoms were moving in the right direction, and now I've got this. Am I ever going to get over this? You know, is there any hope ever for recovery? But here you are.
Yeah.
And you're in a very, very different place. We're now May 2022. So I guess there's a couple of things to reflect on here. Is, well, in terms of, you mentioned that you do get some symptoms every now and again. Would you say that you're still suffering from pelvic pain then? But how would you phrase where you are at the moment, Darius?
I definitely wouldn't refer to myself like that anymore. No, thankfully not. It's not something I think about very often. So I would say once, twice a year I might get a flare up. So I'm in a good position. I'm not maybe sure if everyone's in as good position as that. But I think this is the way my body works. That's something we came to terms with, that when things get tough, when my body's in a bad state, that's how my body reacts. So I think this is something that will always be there. If I don't look after myself, if I don't look after my body, if I don't give it what it needs, then I think this is how my body will answer. And I think that's what it was for me. So yes, I still get flare-ups, but I'm not suffering from pelvic pain. I had pelvic pain every single day, every single minute for many, many months. Yeah. And now it's maybe once, twice a year at most. And they're short flare-ups. And I think the main thing is I've got the tools to deal with them now. When they come, I might do my exercises more often than I were. I might say, hey, what's wrong in my life? Why am I getting this flare-up? What's going on? And I've always take a look at myself. I think, have I been overworking? Have I not been doing enough relaxation? You know, what am I doing wrong? And there often is something wrong. There's often a reason behind it. Something happened, something I was skipping or not doing. But most importantly is I don't panic. I don't think, oh no, I've got these symptoms again. I understand that it's a familiar feeling now. It's like, oh, it's this again. You know, let's take a look. What's going on? And then it goes away, and it it doesn't come back. So I think that's the main thing, is and that's what you help me do. You help me understand it and not to fear it.
And it is, you know, thank you so much for laying that out for us as well. Someone else might get headaches, someone else might get IBS, someone else in stressful periods may get an outbreak of skin complaints. You know, your body is just expressing itself in the pelvis. And as you said, you're now much more attuned to that. You now know how to manage that if it does bubble up. So you're in a far, far better place now, Darius. And it was a real pleasure working with you. It's genuinely always so exciting to see someone go through that recovery process. it's so common that people are skeptical, and it's really, really understandable to be skeptical to begin with, like the uncertainty of, well, this guy's not going to give me medication or take anything out. I'm looking for the one simple answer. I'm looking for something really, really quick. This guy's not offering that for me. What would you say to anyone who's just starting or even going through their pelvic pain journey, knowing what you know now, having been through what you've been through? What words of advice can you give to someone?
I mean, I think there's a few things I would say, actually. I think of course you initially would have to rule out anything serious, but those things can be done quite quickly. And I think that's the first thing, of course, you should do. You should, and I think probably by the time they get to you, Cole, they probably would have done that anyway before they even sort of understand pelvic pain and start to hear those words. They probably would have ruled out, because I did all the STI tests, these tests, I did all them initially. So I think, of course, you'd have to rule out anything serious. But then you get to that stage where I've had all the clear, and then but they must have missed something. What? They must have done something wrong. Maybe I should have this test again. There must be something wrong with me. So I think it's once you get to that stage, I think that's when you have to say, okay, there is nothing wrong with me physically. I haven't got an STI, I haven't got this. So something else is going on. And I think that leads us to here. I think it's important to see someone like yourself, someone who will treat you on an individual basis. Someone who will listen to you, because as you said, everyone's going to get slightly different symptoms. Everyone's going to have different things going on in their lives. I think it does require a close relationship with something individual, an individual plan. Like we said, we did a variety of tools, and I don't think one thing's going to work for everyone. It might be that you try something and it doesn't work, so you try something else. But I think if I was going to go back to myself in 2019 and talk to myself, I think the first thing I would say is, I think that was something, again, I'll go back to something you said in the earlier session, was that I've been suffering with pain in my feet for my entire life. I've always had pain. And that pain is far more severe than what I used to get from pelvic pain. It's throbbing, it's painful, but I've had it since I was a kid. So I get that pain. I'm like, oh, is this again? It sucks, but it is what it is. I don't panic. I don't worry about it, because I understand it. I know it's not threatening, and I know it's going to go away. So I think it was getting to a stage where that's how I felt about pelvic pain. Mm-hmm. You haven't got cancer. You're not going to die. Nothing bad's going to happen. Calm down, relax, because those feelings are just prolonging your pelvic pain. Your pelvic pain is probably not going to go away while you're in that position, while you're fearing for your life, something bad's going to, because your body's in this survival state. And I don't think so I think that's the first thing, to be logical with yourself, because you're definitely not logical in that situation, which I know is harder to do than it is to say. But that's the first thing. I think you just need to listen to yourself, be true with yourself, and that nothing really bad is happening. You've had all your tests and you've got the all clear. Something else that was, for me, that was personal is, you might remember, Cole, is that and this is more of a personal thing, so it might not be for everyone, but I hid my pelvic pain from everyone. I didn't talk about it with anyone. My partner, my family they didn't know about it. And since I have talked about it with everyone, I think that's definitely helped a lot. So that worked. That was something that really helped me when I told my partner, when I became more open with it. I think that helped me not see it as something shameful, bad, threatening, something I had to hide from people. So again, it's a very personal thing, but that's something that helped me a lot, because now when I get my pelvic pain, I'll talk to my partner and say, oh, I've got pelvic pain, it's come back. Whereas before it was like, oh, I've got to suffer with this in silence. And so that's something that's helped me a lot, is to talk about it with people and talk about it with my partner, especially. So more of a personal thing, but that's something that's helped me.
Yeah, it's so isolating in itself anyway, isn't it? We often go through it fearful of what other people might think, fearful of what they might say, and so we end up suffering in silence. And then when you do have symptoms and you're just like, I just want someone to know what the hell's going on, then it's difficult to bridge that gap. So yeah, kudos to you for taking that step forward as well, Darius.
Yeah, thanks, Cole. And something we know now since as well, that's something that you've been doing a lot of, which I think is great, is a lot of the online content, the webinars and the programs, some of which I went to myself. And I think they're really useful just to be around for people that have either gone through what you're going through, or people who are going through what you're going through. I think that was really nice to be in a group. I was a little bit quiet in those, but just seeing people, hearing people, you don't have to go in there and talk and say your story, but just to know you're not alone, because it definitely feels very alone. And that's how I felt a lot of the time, very alone. Like the doctors didn't understand me. No one, it's hidden, there's no symptoms. So no one can see anything wrong with you. So it's a very hidden thing. No one else is going through it. No one understands you, or, not until I met you at least. So yeah, it feels very alone for a long period of time. And that's probably how you'll feel coming into, say, meeting someone like Karl. You'll probably feel very alone. So I think those things can be very useful.
That was priceless. Thank you so much, Darius. It was really, really great to catch up. Any final thoughts, any final words before we ring off for today?
One more thing I would say actually is that I know that a lot of people will be skeptical. I was as well, but I would say when it's something that's important to you and it has an effect on it that it does, I would say, give it a try, and I'm sure you won't regret it, because the only thing I could say is that I wish I did it sooner, because we're very skeptical of things that don't necessarily are physical. You didn't give me pills, you didn't give me tablets, you didn't give me this magical food, and that can be quite skeptical at times. You think 5 doctors with a combined experience of 100 years couldn't help me. What hope does Karl have? But here we are. So yeah, try not to be skeptical and give it a try, because it's important to you. It's your life. So yeah, and I'm sure you won't regret it.
And you're living proof as well, aren't you? Here you are when we're doing this. So it's been a real pleasure catching up. Thank you again for sharing your story, Darius. It means so much to me and so many other men who are listening to this right now. So as always, take care, mate.